Welcome to the March Team Studio and TLCC webinar. Thank you for joining us today and happy St. Patrick's Day. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Howard Greenberg, and today's speaker, Paul Della-Nebbia from TLCC, who will be presenting data, an alternative to the view control. My name is Courtney. I'm the inbound marketing specialist at Team Studio and your co-host today. Before we start talking about today's topic, I'll be taking a few moments to tell you who we are and what we do at Team Studio. I'll then be passing the controls to Howard Greenberg at TLCC so he can give an intro, and then we'll dive right into today's topic. To get us started, I'd like to cover a few administrative points. To protect your privacy, the attendee list is not public. All attendees are muted during this session, so you can participate by typing your questions to the speakers inside the questions section on your GoToWebinar window. We're doing Q&A at the end of this session, but you're welcome to ask your question at any point in the questions section, and we'll get to it once the formal presentation has concluded. This session is being recorded, and the link will be sent to you in a follow-up email in a few days. So a little bit about Team Studio. We may have assisted you in the past with application development. We've been delivering innovative developer tools and productivity tools to the Notes and Domino community since 1996, where we specialized in source code control, version management, and source code management. And we moved into the mobile application arena in 2010 with our mobile application platform, Unplugged. The market not only needed this app platform, but it also needed help building app building expertise. So we offer modernization services to web enable and mobilize IBM Notes and Domino applications. Unplugged gives you the ability to extend your IBM Notes apps out to mobile devices. It leverages the powerful technology of XPages and provides a native app experience for the user. And these apps have the capability to function when offline. Apps run very quickly, and development of apps is easier than ever. We're very proud to have been the recipient of 2 IBM Collaboration Solutions Awards for Unplugged in 2013 and 2014. In January 2014 at the Connect conference, IBM awarded Unplugged with the Best of Show and CTO award. And at IBM Partner World in February 2014, IBM recognized the platform as a finalist for a Beacon Award. This product is available on the major mobile platforms, BlackBerry, Android, and iOS. In addition to Unplugged as a platform, we also provide off-the-shelf template apps like Team Studio Continuity for mobile business continuity, OneView for mobile approvals requests, and Customer View for mobile CRM. We'd be happy to arrange a demo to show you how any of these tools work. Just contact us directly from our website or by phone. Late last year, we launched X Controls on OpenNTF. This project allows you to quickly create XPages apps by dragging and dropping custom controls into your XPages. The apps you create will work on desktop browsers, mobile browsers, and Team Studio Unplugged. You can download the X Controls template from OpenNTF, along with a sampler application that shows you how to make use of the different controls to build an application. You can learn more at teamstudio.com/solutions/xfoundations. Here at Team Studio, we offer professional services that can provide you with the resources you need to meet project deadlines. Our services, such as the Unplugged Developer Assistance Program, Application Upgrade Analysis, and Application Usage Auditing, can help you work more efficiently with fewer errors. Learn more by visiting teamstudio.com/solutions/services. The IBM Notes Application Usage Auditing tool from Team Studio allows you to track user activity of Notes databases with an automated process. Now through March 31st, if you sign up for a free demo of usage auditing, you'll be automatically entered to win a Nexus 6. Just click on the banner on the Team Studio homepage. Lastly, we'll be at Engage this month in Belgium. Stop by and say hello for a chance to win an iPhone 6. And with that, I would like to pass the presentation on to Howard so he can talk a little bit about TLCC and then dive into today's topic. Over to you, Howard.
Thank you, Courtney, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our session on presenting data in alternative to the view control. My name is Howard Greenberg, and I'll be your host today. Normally we have Paul is also a host, but today he is our presenter. So hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Looks good,
Paul,
Howard.
Courtney, thank you. Okay, a little bit about TLCC. Many of you are familiar with us because we've been around since 1997. We have courses that are self-paced that you take using the Notes client and Domino Designer or Domino Administrator, depending on the course. And we have a full catalog of courses on XPages, Notes and Domino Development, and Domino Administration, as well as courses for users on Domino 9, or I should say Notes 9, as well as the older versions. Our best-selling courses are free demo courses. I'll talk more about that in a second. And we also provide mentoring services. We've helped a number of our clients as they not only take our course, but then as they go to apply their skills that they learned in our courses to their projects, they sometimes have additional questions or need help getting started. So we offer mentoring services as well. And we also have done private classes where we go on-site to your location, or we can even do these virtually using technology like we're using today with GoToMeeting. And last but not least is that we can also develop any applications that you might have a need for. We can either convert your existing Notes app to XPages or develop new apps and also help you with any administration issues you might have. A little more about one of our free courses, Introduction XPages Development. It's about 3 hours self-paced course that you will actually get some hands-on experience working in Domino Designer. So if any of you on the call today haven't really gotten started with XPages, you're just kind of putting your feet in the waters and seeing what it's about, this is a really great start. And again, it's totally free. You just have to register for it at our site, and the link is on the slides that everyone will be getting a day or two after this webinar. Upcoming, we have in April, Oliver is going to do a session on migrating to XPages, talk a little bit about some of the issues you need to know, things like how do you set up variables to find the paths to the different databases and stuff like that. And then on May 14th, we got a really great lineup of IBM employees who are going to talk about Domino App Dev and where it's going, the future of XPages, and a little bit on Bluemix and XPages. And we're still working on June. We got a couple great potential webinars that hopefully we'll finalize in the next week or so. So stay tuned at our website. You can get all the information at the link on the screen. You can also view the previous webinars going back probably about 3-4 years that we've ever done. So definitely visit that page and check out all the different learning opportunities there. Okay, so asking questions. What you were going to do is hold your questions until the end, but in the meantime, as we're going through the webinar, you can ask your questions using the panel. So you just have to go to the questions pane and ask your questions there. So don't ask your questions in the chat window that you might see. Ask it in the questions pane. If for some reason you're not seeing this interface, there'll be a little ribbon bar, kind of like on the image on the left. You just click that little orange arrow to expand the interface, and you'll see the questions pane there. So we'll get to your questions at the end of the webinar. We should have time for your questions. Our presenter today, I should first mention before I introduce Paul, is that we had hoped to have Oliver talk about using the Bootstrap data tables as another alternative to presenting data. Unfortunately, he had a scheduling issue that he had to cancel. He will be here next month. That won't be an issue, and everything's okay. It's just that he couldn't make it on today's plan. So what happened is Paul was our other planned speaker, and Paul just graciously added a lot more to his material that he planned to talk about. So you're going to get a real in-depth look at the Dojo Data Grid. So Paul, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Howard.
Okay, I'll make you the presenter. Oh, looks like you made yourself the presenter. I'll take it away, Paul.
Are you seeing my screen, Howard?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to be presenting using a series of slides and jumping over to Designer and working with a demo database, and both will be available to you after the webinar. So both the slides and the demo database as well. So this first slide, some features of the Dojo Data Grid. Infinite scrolling, nice feature as the user scrolls through the data. Another block of data is fetched from the data source. There's a lot of nice column features, so the user can adjust the size of the columns, the width of the columns, they can reorder columns, and they can click on the column headings to sort the column values. There's highlighting for the hovered column, for selected columns, and even alternate row highlighting as well. In-grid editing feature is very easy to enable. And a nice interface to provide to your users. And there's also an enhanced data grid with a filtering plugin that we'll look at the end. But really that first point, infinite scrolling, you had me there because that's a nice user interface feature. What do you need in terms of system requirements to use the Dojo Data Grid? It's built right into Release 9. So if you're running Release 9, you've got everything you need. If you're running Release 8.5, you can also use the Dojo Data Grid, but you'll need to install either the IBM upgrade pack for Release 8.5 or the XPages extension library from OpenNTF for Release 8.5. This slide shows the main steps to create a Dojo Data Grid, and alternates, or the next few slides are going to go into some of the details here. But first off, you would create a REST service to provide a data source for your data grid, and then you would add your Dojo Data Grid control onto your XPage and bind it to that REST service. And then finally, you would add Dojo Data Grid columns into the grid to display the column value. It's actually referred to as field value or field data once it's in a REST service. So the
Paul,
details.
this is Howard.
Yep.
Can you hear me? Your audio is a little bit distorted and breaking up a little. I don't know if you have a way to adjust your mic, or it's a little choppy.
I'm not sure that I actually can. I can turn down my mic. Does that sound better?
Well, we'll just see. Go ahead and take it away. And
okay. So again, the details for creating that REST service, you add a REST service control to your XPage, and then you would choose one of the following service types, either a Vue.json service if you have a read-only application, or a Vue item file service if it's a read-write application, if you can provide some ability to delete the entries in the grid or update or edit the entries in the grid. You'd set the appropriate properties for the service, so specify the database name and the view name where the view is located. Indicate the content type as application JSON. So a Dojo Data Grid requires its data or its data source in the format of JSON, and that's why you can't bind a data grid directly to a Domino view data source, and you use the REST service instead to provide that binding. You'd set the default columns to true to get and display, or to make all of the columns within that view available to your data grid. Specify a sort column and a var variable as well. Now, the final point there is to set the path info property for your REST service, and that's just very useful to quickly test your REST service. So let me switch into Designer and demonstrate that part. of creating the REST service. And I'm going to be creating it here in this Dojo Data Grid or sales order application, and this is the application that you'll have available to you. So all of these demonstrations are coming from our XPages 2 course, but what I've done is I've taken some documents and views from the sales database and from the customers database, and I've moved them into this demonstration or orders database. So I have some sales documents, and this is the main view that I'm going to be using. And it's got things like the order number and the customer name for an order and what city and the total for the order and so on. Quite a few fields, or sorry, quite a few columns. Some of these columns you can see that they're click to sort for these columns, city and order total and order number. State and the rest of these are not set up. Look, it appears that order date also is a sortable column as well in my view. Okay, so I'm going to create a new X page, and I'll just call it Orders Grid. And in the data access portion of my controls, or area of my controls, I'm going to add in a REST service. And not a lot of properties on this page. You can give your REST service a name. So you'll work in the all properties. And I'll leave that ID, that control ID, as REST service 1. What I need to do at this point is add a service type, and I would add a view JSON service for a read-only application, or a view item file service if it's a read-write application. This is going to be a read-only application. I just want to present the data in that view in my data grid. View within the current database, and I'll just select that view. Now, this is the important setting here. Content type is application JSON. So your data grid does require its data source in the format of JSON. So that's where we're converting our Domino view data source into a JSON format. Setting the default columns to true so that all of the columns within my data source within that view are available within my REST service, and setting the sort column, and that was that order number column, okay? Sorting by that column. If I had a need, I might set this var variable as well, rs entry, if I needed to address each entry within my REST service. Okay, I'm not going to do that within this application, but we'll see using that later on. Now, here's an important property to set for testing purposes, path info, and I'm going to set it to simply path info. And that's it. I'm going to save that. I'm going to preview that. And here's what I get in my browser. I get a big blank screen, and that to see the contents of my REST service. So that's a really useful property to set on your REST service to quickly see whether or not you are returning any data from the, in this case, Domino view data source. So I can see that this is the first entry within my REST service, and I can see that, first of all, I can see that it is in a JSON format. I can see the customer assigned Winder Golf, and I can see the order number and the city and the order total. So all of those columns are available to me because default columns is true. But also I can see that there are fields like at position, which were automatically added to my REST service data source. And I can see that this particular entry has 187 siblings. So that's how many orders there are in my orders view. And I can also see this as well. So the document unique ID, and that is extremely useful for a lot of applications. If you're going to have a two-page application where On your view page, you're going to have your Dojo Data Grid, and then when the user clicks on one of those orders, you're going to provide a link to open up your document page, and you're going to pass in that document ID. Document ID is equal to whatever is in this @unique ID field.
Hey, Paul. Maybe this is a good stopping point. Can you dial in on your phone? If you click on the telephone radio button, it'll tell you the dial-in number and your access code, because the audio is not very good. We're getting some complaints.
Yes, dialing in on my phone, it's not tied into my headset.
Can you just go on speaker with your cell phone or something? Because it would probably be better than what we're hearing.
Let me try. Okay, let me take a break and see if we can do that.
If everyone can just hold tight for a few seconds, we'll get Paul in on a different line, and hopefully that will work better.
So Howard,
do you want me to take over? I can't. I know if I can do that. But if everyone can hold tight for a second, we'll try to get a better audio for everyone.
okay, can you hear me?
That sounds much better.
Oh, okay.
Yes, all right. Sorry, everyone. Paul, take it away.
All right, let me reset here. Okay, returning to the slides here, step 2 is to add your Dojo Data Grid control onto your X page. You're going to bind that to the REST service that you created on your X page. You're going to set some properties like the auto height property and the rows per page, and I'll describe what those do in a moment. And you optionally might set some Dojo attributes as well, like auto width is true, and if you want to enable column reordering for the user, column reordering is true. Actually, one more slide. Step 3 is once you've added your Dojo Data Grid, into that you're going to add Dojo DataGrid Column controls. You're going to set the field in your REST service, they're referred to as fields. You're going to set in your dominant view data source, that's the columns as the column names, actually the programmable column names. So you're going to set the field, the label, what you want to see in your column heading, and probably the width for those columns as well. And you're going to repeat that for each additional column. So onto my X page. Here in the Dojo layout area of my controls, I see my Dojo Data Grid and my grid columns. And if you want to, you can actually create a Dojo Data Grid with multiple grid rows for each entry, but we're not going to do that. I'm not a big fan of that approach, but we're just going to go with a grid, and then we'll add grid columns directly into that. So I'm going to set some properties for my grid. And one of the properties is auto height. Now, you might think this is a true or a false, but actually it's a number. It's the number of rows you want to display in the grid. And rows per page is the number of rows to fetch as the user scrolls through that grid. And that's a little confusing because I would have kind of picked them the other way, but that's what they are. This is the number of rows to display and the number of rows to fetch. So I'll set that to 50. I'll set that to very different numbers so we can see that. Okay, going to add into that a column. And let me just resize here. And I want to display the order number. So I can see in my REST service data source the field names like order number and customer and city and so on. So for this one, I want to point to the order number field. The label, the column heading is something like order number. And then I may want to set a width as well. I'm going to set that to 100 pixels. Okay, and I would repeat that for, I'm going to do the first 5 columns, but I'm actually going to do that in the source. So let me rearrange things. And here's that first column that I created. So I'll just copy and paste that in the source. Okay, so we're going to have order number, and referring here, we're going to have customer, city, state, and order total. So customer, the label, customer, and this one will make 200 pixels. And finally, order total, the last field of data I want to display. Okay, going to save that and preview those changes. And not getting anything here. I am getting my labels, but it looks like I failed in terms of binding my grid to that REST service. And that was an important step. So let me go back to my Dojo Data Grid properties. And here's where I bind my Dojo Data Grid to my REST service, so I can specify or simply select any REST services that I've added to this page. I've added just this one, REST service 1. Let me save that and refresh. Much better. Okay, and as a user, I can scroll through this. I can click on these column headings. I get this automatic sorting capability that's built into it. Now, one thing that I don't like is my grid is actually expanding to fit the container. I can see the scroll bar way over here on the right. So I'm going to want to adjust that. And to do that, in my Dojo Data Grid properties, on the Dojo tab, I'm going to add a Dojo attribute called AutoWhip. And set that to true. And another property you might want to add is column reordering. right? If you want to enable that as well. So let me save that and refresh. And now I'm getting that scroll bar, that auto width feature, and the scroll bar is directly beside my grid. And the user can also reorder columns. So if I wanted to take this order number column, shuffle it over here, I could do that. Now, as I indicated, you automatically get that sorting capability. However, this column here, the state column, I'm clicking on that and it's not really sorting very well for me. So the problem here is that that state column is not enabled for column sorting in my Domino view data source, in the underlying view. So I have two choices here. One is I can turn off column sorting for the entire grid, or I can turn it off for that individual column, and that's what I'm going to go to next. So let's take a look at that. So to turn it off for all of the columns, you add a can sort property and set it to false. The default is the user can sort on every column. However, when we have, in our example, in our application right now, a column that is not supported for column sorting, then we can just choose that column and turn it off. So for our grid object, can sort is false, going to return false to that property when it's the fourth column. When you add a can sort function to your grid, you're passing the column in terms of a column number. You cannot specify the name, so positioning is very important here. And the reason it's an absolute is because as the user clicks on it the first time, the column heading the first time, that's a +4, and the next time it's a -4, and so on. So we're taking the absolute value of that. So let's take a look at how that was done. And this is in our 1A demonstration. And let me just preview that. And I can still sort on some of these columns, city, all of these, except state. Nothing's happening as I'm clicking on that state column. So how was that done? When I take a look at this X page, and I go to the events in the on-client load event, that's where I coded a can sort function that returns false when it's column 4, otherwise returns true. Okay, next technique. Is to create a custom column. So I'm going to modify this city column to show the city, comma, and state as well. And you would think that you would code that in the Dojo grid column control. However, what you're actually doing is you're coding that in your REST service. So you're adding a custom column into your REST service and then pointing your Dojo grid column to that custom column in your REST service. So let's take a look at that example. And that's this second example, custom columns, and I can see for this city column, I'm seeing city, comma, state. So how is that done? This is the 1B example. So let me take a look at that example. And I can see that in the properties for this city column, I'm pointing to this field, city, state. And that's not, or that is part of my REST service, and it was added in as a custom column here. Okay, so this REST service has a custom column called city, state, and it's using this formula. Okay. Returning RS entry get column values for city plus comma space RS entry get column value state, and RS entry is this var variable for my REST service. okay, to reference each entry within my REST service data source. Okay, and that's how that was done. Okay, next technique that I want to explore is the argument zero object, which for certain events represents the row object within the data grid. And the events are the on-row click, so when the user clicks on a row or when they double-click on a row, or the on-style row event, whenever that event runs. And what it contains are properties like the row index for the cell where they clicked on a row, the cell index for the specific cell that they clicked in, the actual cell container where they clicked, and the grid that contains, that particular cell, the entire grid, if you will. Now, there are a lot of other properties for the argument zero object, but those are the main ones that you'll tend to use. Okay, so this is the 1C argument zero demonstration. And a couple of things here. One is this Dojo Data Grid in this example has this property set, JavaScript ID, JSID equals grid object. So that's going to be a variable that I can use in my client-side scripts to refer to that particular, to my Dojo Data Grid itself. And there's also a JSID property for REST services. So if you want to refer to them in your scripts, you can use that one as well. Now, also in my Dojo Data Grid, if I scroll down in the properties, I see a number of events. Now, there's quite a number of events. The ones that I tend to use are on row click, on row double click, and on style row. We'll see some applications of that later on. Now, my on row click event is only coded to get unique ID, get unit. And I've defined this in this output script control. Okay, so this is going to output some script tags, and the value of this output script control, or the script that it's going to output, is here. Okay, so we have a function, get unique ID, that's what's going to run when the user clicks on a row, and passing in that grid object variable that I defined in the JSID property for my grid, passing that into my grid, and then for this variable here, index, using my argument zero object, which represents the row in the grid, and returning the row index property. For the cell index, for argument zero, returning cell index, and so on. So let's see that in action. And what I'm going to do here is turn on my client-side JavaScript debugger. And I've already turned this on yesterday, and I added a number of breakpoints in my script. So here's my get unique ID function within my script tags, lines 57 to 68. So this is a result of my output script control. And I've got breakpoints on the first 5 lines of this, 5 or 6. And what I see here in the watch expressions is I've added watch expressions to watch the grid object. That variable has already been set. That was set when this page was loaded. Argument zero, so that hasn't been set yet. So that's going to be a representation of the row that I click on. Index, cell index, entry, unique ID, unit, and grid. So let's see when these are fired. So I'm going to click on this first row, first column, or first cell. And my script runs to this first breakpoint where it's going to set the grid object. But notice here in my watch expressions that argument zero has now been set. Okay, and if I expand that, which represents the row, I see things like cell index, and that's 0 for the first cell. So that's 0 based. I see cell, which is a representation of the container cell itself. Further down in here, I'm going to see row index. Okay, row index is 0 as well. That's the first row, also 0 based. Okay, so that has been set as soon as I clicked on that. So argument 0 is going to be passed to your on row click, on row double click, and the on style row events as well, whenever that is triggered. Okay, running through this, it set my grid variable to my grid object. So now that is pointing to my grid. And stepping through this, argument 0 cell index is returning 0. Oh, sorry, that's this line that just ran. Argument 0 row index returns 0 to this index variable that I have. And now when I run it again, cell index is 0 as well. So I can continue to run this. And the entry has been set with this line of code. Okay, so grid.getItem and passing the index. Now let's take a look at what's in that entry. And what's in that entry is the entry from my REST service data source. So I can see the customer name, and I can see the city and contact, and all of that information that is part of that entry. And if I wanted to pick off a particular field within that entry, I can just specify entry and the field name. And the one that I'm going to pick off is the unique ID. So that is the document unique ID. And that's what I would use in that two-page application where I have a grid on my view page, if you will, and when they click on a link within my grid, it's going to open up in a document XPage. It's going to open up this particular document. So I can pass in document ID is equal to and whatever is within that unique ID field. Okay, so extremely important object to know that's available to you, the argument 0 object. And in fact, we're going to use that in this next example here. So in this example here, if I go back to our previous examples, I wasn't formatting my total value as currency, and that's what I'm going to do in this example. I'm going to format this as currency. User will still be able to click on that to sort it in ascending or descending order, but we get this currency formatting. Also, I'm going to push it to the right side of the cell as well. Oh, that's not what I wanted. There we go. Okay, so this 1D example, I can see that the total column is still bound to the order total field, but now we have a formatter function, format currency, and once again, rather than code it here, which I could have, I coded it in an output script control just for easier debugging, really. And I can see the value, or I can see this function here defined, the value for that output script control, function format currency. Now, a formatter function will, by default, take 3 arguments, and in this specific order. The value of the cell, the row index for the cell, and the actual cell itself, the container cell. And that's useful because I can now refer to that cell and push in a custom style to align the text to the right-hand side. Now, this second line is returning the actual value. So returning the cell value, but formatted as currency. So Dojo, using the Dojo currency module, the format function within that, passing in the cell value and these arguments to format it as US currency with 2 decimal places. So that's how that technique was delivered. Okay, you have your full searching and filtering properties available to your view JSON service and your view item file service as well. So what we see here is really what looks very familiar to a Domino view data source. So when you create and add a Domino view data source to an XPage or a view control, you see things like category filter and search to provide a full text search. So we have search and search max docs and keys exact match. So all of those filters and searching capabilities that you have in your Domino view data source are also available to your JSON, your view JSON service, and your view item file service as well. So let's take a look at this technique. And I can, on this page, enter in the search string California and search on that, and getting just a whole bunch of orders from customers in California. And I have created a full text index on this database, so if I enter in CA asterisk and search on that wildcard search, I get all those California, but I also get some Alberta orders as well from a customer in Calgary, Alberta, a number of those as well. So how is that done? Okay, so this is the 23 example. Okay, and the first thing that we're seeing here is for this search field, my search 1 input control, I can see that it's bound to a scope variable, the view scope grid search variable. And I can, when I go into my REST service and view its properties, I can see that where are you? Oh, here we are. The search property is bound to that same scoped variable. Okay, view scope.grid search. So basically passing whatever the user inputs into this into that search property. Now you probably want to set search max docs equals to 0 to return all of the documents that are returned for that search. Otherwise, the default is the first 32 documents are returned for that search. And that's basically it. I just need a way to trigger that. And if I take a look at the on-click event for this search button, it's not really doing anything. It's not coded to do anything. It's only coded to do a partial update on the grid panel. And the grid panel is that panel that contains my grid. Okay, to clear the search, setting view scope grid search to null, and then doing, again, a partial update on the grid panel. Okay, going to switch to another data set, my customer documents, to explore a number of CRUD capabilities. So we're going to take a look at in-grid editing. We're going to take a look at deleting entries in a grid, creating entries in a grid, and so on. Well, actually, let's just do a demonstration of this first. So I'm going to double click on this address and set that to 3. Something visually that I can see. And if I save those changes, I can see that those changes are saved. I went into another XPage that's using that same data source. I can see that they were in fact saved, those changes. Okay, so how is that done? So first off in the slide, obviously this is a right top type of operation. So we cannot use the view JSON service. We need to use the view item file service, our read-write service. We're going to set the JavaScript ID, the JS ID of that, to some variable. I'm going to call it REST service obj, and I'm going to do that consistently for all of these examples. We're also going to set the JavaScript ID for the data grid to grid obj, and again, I'll do that consistently for all of these examples. You can optionally set the single click edit to true. So in the demonstration I just showed you, I had to double click on that address cell. So with that set to true, it's a single click. And then finally, you set for any column where you want to enable the in-grid editing, you want to enable or set editable to true. To save the changes, you're going to use your variable that's referencing your REST service, so REST service obj.save, call the save method, to cancel the changes, close your REST service, and then call the _refresh method from your grid object to refresh your grid. So let's take a look at this example, and this is DG42, that example. Okay, if I take a look at my REST service properties, I can see that the JS ID is set to REST service OBJ, and for my data grid, its JS ID is set to grid OBJ. Also, I can see that this single-click edit has not been set, so I'm going to change that. I'm going to set that to true. See the effect of that. And then for each column where you want to enable the editing, you would set editable to true. So not for customer, just for that address. So I see that that is set to true. And the last thing you need to do is save those changes or enable the saving or the canceling of those changes. So in Save Changes, for that button, I can see the save method from my REST service object being called. And you can pass arguments to the save method. And in this case, a single argument is being passed, the onError argument. And in the case of an error, then this unnamed function alerts the user that there was some sort of an error and the changes were not saved. To cancel the changes, you would code your client-side JavaScript to first close the REST service object and then refresh the grid with the _refresh method. And that's basically it. I think I did save that change, so let me just see if it took that change for the single-click edit. And that's a single click. And again, a single click. Let me cancel these changes. Okay, and I'm not seeing those changes. Okay, this example here, in-grid editing with style. A couple of things here, but mainly I want to show you that when I make changes here, this is the styling that we're adding. And so we're going to indicate which rows have changed, a visual indication to the user that they really need to push that Save Change buttons, otherwise they're not going to see those changes. So how is that done? So that was coded in the onStyleRow event, which fires whenever a new row is added into your REST service data source, when a row is hovered, when a row is selected, or, in our example, when a row is changed. So that's going to fire, and notice this first line here, argument 0, is equal, well, basically assigning argument 0 into a variable within our script, row entry. So the argument 0 object, which represents the row in the grid, is available to our onStyleRow event as well. Okay, so this is the 44 example. Actually, just before we go into Designer, a couple of other things. This has a column called row index, which is kind of nice. It shows me the row index for the row number, if you will, for each entry within my grid. And also, this one here, I've got some sort of a select capability right here within my grid column. So let's take a look at how those two columns were added as well. So this is the 44 example. Okay, so first off, for this row index, this is not bound to a field. It has a label, but it's not getting any data. It just has a cell type of Dojo DataGrid cells row index, and that's how you provide that capability. And we can see that there are a number of cell types. So the first one there, Dojo DataGrid cells cell, is your default type of cell for your columns within your Dojo Data Grid. Select is what was used for the promo eligible. Always edit is for an editable row. It's always going to be, or it'll be thrown into edit mode as soon as the user enters that row, and Boolean to prevent a checkbox interface. So let's take a look at this promo eligible, and we can see that the cell type is Dojo DataGrid cells select. And the options to select are defined in this options property. And basically just creating an array with 3 choices, null, no choice, yes and no, and returning those choices. And so that's how that was created. Now notice that the editable property for promo eligible is set to true, not for that city, it's not set to true, certainly for that address as well. It's within this example. Now selecting my grid and scrolling down to the events for my grid, we see this onStyle row event has been coded with this code here. So first, taking that argument 0 object, which represents my row, and passing it to this row entry variable, and then firing this event, this unnamed function, when that row entry is changed. So row entry node on change, firing this function, and basically pushing in the index for that row into this array, edited rows array. And I'm going to show you that was actually defined here as an empty array in my output script control. Okay, so when my page is loaded, that's going to be an empty array. When the user changes a particular column value within a particular row, the index for that particular row is going to be added into that edited rows array. And then what we're doing here is basically adding the style to that row entry. So adding that green color to that row entry. So if my row entry index is in my edited rows array, we're going to append that style. If I take a look at my output script control, there's only one line of code here, basically defining that edited rows array as an empty array. A couple of changes to my Save Changes event, or my Save Changes button, and basically clearing that edited rows array, okay, and then again closing the rest service, or saving the changes, closing the rest service, and refreshing the grid. And for cancel changes, same thing, clearing that edited rows array before closing the service and refreshing the grid. Okay, next example that we're going to take a look at is deleting entries in a grid, and I'm going to select quite a few entries here with this cool little selector column. We'll take a look at that as well. And then I'm going to delete those. Okay, total number of rows in this grid is 41. Continue deleting 23 customer entries. Okay, and I'm left with 18 entries within this grid. Okay, on this slide, I see that there is a getSelected method within my grid object to return the selected entries within a grid. And I also see there is a deleteItem method for a viewFileItem service. So as long as you have your REST service defined as a viewFileItem service, there is a deleteItem method, and you can pass a selected item to that method to delete that selected item. Okay, so this is the 51 example. So let's take a look at that. Okay. Just to refer to that, we've got this row index column here showing the row index, but we also have this select column. So let's take a look at how that was enabled. So in my Dojo Data Grid, if I scroll down into the properties here, I see a row selector set to 20 pixels, and that's all you need to do. You set it to how wide you want that row selector, and you change it to 30 pixels. Okay, now to delete the selected rows, and again, I'm referring to my grid object as grid obj and my REST service object as REST service obj. I take a look at the code in this button to delete the selected entries, returning my grid object to grid, a variable called grid, and to a variable called rsstore, returning my REST service object, and getting the selected items. So grid.selection.getSelected will return all of those selected items to this variable, items. So first checking to see if the user has in fact selected some items. And if they haven't, just presenting an alert, you haven't selected any items, but if they have, prompting with an XSP confirm, do you really want to delete the selected items? And if they click on OK, then true will be returned here to this variable, continue. And this is the actual code to delete those selected items. So using a Dojo for each, now this is a base Dojo function that's available to you anywhere in your client-side JavaScript. You just have to call it. You don't have to add a Dojo module to the XPage or anything like that. So in a Dojo for each, for each of the selected item in my items collection, and that's where I have my selected items in my items collection, I'm running this code. So as long as it's not null, the selected item is not null, I'm going to pass that selected item to the delete item method for my REST service control, for my view file item service. Okay? I'm going to save those changes and refresh the grid. And that's how that technique was delivered. Okay, the next CRUD technique that we're going to take a look at is creating entries directly in a grid. And to create entries, you must use a Vue.json service, and that was a surprise to me. So, it's common if you want to deliver those CRUD capabilities, directly in your grid, you want to be able to create entries, you want to be able to delete entries, you want to be able to update entries. Well, for the delete and update, we needed a Vue file item service. For the creation, we need a Vue.json service. And the reason we need a Vue.json service is there is no new item method in the Vue file item service. That's only available in the Vue.json service. For me, this is kind of surprising, but that's the way it is. So how do I get around that? Well, what I do is I add two REST services to my XPage. One, a Vue file item service to support the deleting, the updating, maybe even the reading within the grid. And the other one, the Vue.json service, only to support that create capability if I want to add that as well within the same application. Okay, so first off, a demonstration. Okay, so we can still delete the entries in this particular grid, and that's using that Vue file item service, and we can also create entries in the grid. Okay, so I've got some sort of validation here. Actually, I don't have much validation here. It's just a special type of control. I'll show you that in the XPage design. So I'm going to add a new entry and save it, and all of the code to actually save or to add this entry into our REST services in this Save button. So we'll take a look at that. And now I see this new entry added into the grid. So I'm supporting both creating and deleting. Okay, so this is the 65 example or demo here. Let me expand it a little bit more here. So one thing that pops out is we can see there are two REST services. This one here, just as I've done in the past, I've called it REST Service OBJ. This is a view item file service. This is the one that is being used to display the entries within the grid and also to support the delete functionality. This one here, which I'm given the JavaScript ID REST Service OBJ2, so I'm going to reference it this way with REST Service OBJ2. This is a view JSON service. It is to the same data sources, to the same customer's new set view. Everything is the same. Variables, sort column, default columns, all of that is the same. The only difference is it's a view JSON service to support the create capability. When I take a look at the code for that create button, not much here, just opening a dialog control. So I've got a dialog control called dialog 1, and that's here within my XPage. And within that, there are a number of Dojo validation text boxes. And these are a really nice interface if you want to provide validation as well, client-side validation. And all you need to do is specify the required field is true to enable these. So I've got one that's called dialog customer 1 and dialog address 1 and dialog city 1. Now, the actual save functionality is, or create functionality, is in this save button within my dialog. Let me just expand that a little bit so we can see it all. So my save button, first, it's returning the form where this dialog customer 1 input control is located and testing to see whether or not the form validate returns true. And if it does not return true, simply returning to end this client-side script. On the other hand, if the form did validate, I'm getting the value of that dialog customer 1 and dialog address 1 and dialog city 1, getting the values of those and assigning it to these variables, customer address city, and also assigning something to form. I want to add a form field to this new entry. So customer new set form is my form name. Creating the new entry in this variable here, so var new entry, and specifying or passing that customer value into this customer field and address into address field, city, and form, and so on. And then finally, setting this variable grid to my grid object, this variable to my REST service object 2. That is my view JSON service. Had to use a view JSON service, had to add that second REST service, okay, REST service object 2, because it's the view JSON service that has a new item method. Okay, so calling the new item method and passing in that new entry into that, saving my REST service, closing it, and refreshing the grid, and then finally closing the dialog. And that's how that was delivered. There's another example here, and at any time, if you do download this database, you can reset your testing documents just by pushing this button on the right here. But there's another example here that has the complete capability, so you can add new entries, you can select entries for deleting, and you can update entries or edit entries directly in the grid. And all those capabilities are enabled within that example. And again, if we take, I'm not going to go into all of the details of that example, but just want to show you one thing. Once again, within this example, there was a need for two REST services. They want a file item service to support the deleting, the updating within the grid, and one a Vue.json service to support the creating. Okay, last example that we're going to look at is an example of this filtering capability, which is only available in the Dojo DataGrid. So when you add the filter plugin to an enhanced data grid, you get this interface where the user can create a filtering set of rules. So let's say order number contains, okay, I want my January order, so S01. Okay, and I'm going to add another rule. Okay, so I've got this one here, order number contains 01. I'm going to add a second rule where state equals or contains California. And I can add yet another. You can add up to 3 rules by default, but you can even change that. Actually, I'm not going to add that rule. Delete that. So you can push that X button to delete any of the particular rules. And when you want to filter, press filter, and returning just my orders from California, customers in California who ordered in January. Okay, so how was that done? So one more slide here. First thing, you must use a Vue item file service. You would add the enhanced grid module and a number of modules and style sheets to support this functionality. So within your XPages resource, adding in Dojo X Grid, Enhanced Grid, and Dojo X.grid.enhance.plugins, the filter plugin, and these 3 style sheets. And then what you would do is in your Dojo properties for your grid, what you would do is specify this Dojo type, Dojo X Grid, Enhanced Grid, which basically says, I don't want to use the default Dojo X Grid Data Grid module. I want to use that Enhanced Grid module for my Dojo Data Grid control. And then you would also add this particular Dojo attribute, plugins, and filter is true. So let's take a look at that. This is the 81 example and the last example that we have here. And I can see there's a number of XPages resources. So when I go to my Resources tab, these first 2, this is just for formatting the total column in a currency format, but these first 2 were added to support the enhanced grid and specifically the filtering property or the filtering feature of the enhanced grid. And these 3 style sheets. And so grid CSS, enhanced grid CSS, and Claro enhanced. Oh, can't get that all on this interface. Okay, in my Dojo Data Grid, if I go to the Dojo properties, I can see this Dojo type was added for the grid. So rather than using Dojo X Grid dot Data Grid, use the dot Enhanced Grid for this Dojo Data Grid control. And this property was added as well, or sorry, this Dojo attribute. Plugins, filter is true. And that's it for that technique. Okay, so very simple. Howard, I think I'm done here.
Okay, thanks, Paul. That was very informative, and we have a lot of questions. Before we get to the questions, a couple of things. First of all, if you want to learn more about the Dojo Data Grids, we have a course, our XPages Development 2, that not only covers this, but covers a lot on how to improve your XPages performance with partial refresh and partial execution, understanding the XPages lifecycle. migration strategies, how to localize your XPages for different languages, kind of an advanced custom controls section. Another interesting part to this course is using Dojo to create charts on your XPages. Again, with just like what Paul was showing, you don't need anything extra to add to your XPages. It's all right out of the box. Another thing that we cover in this course that I saw will come up in the questions is that if you want to return some custom JSON data to the Dojo Data Grid or to anything, we cover how to create what's called XAgents that can return XML and JSON or HTML to the browser or whatever service was requesting it. Of course, the Dojo Data Grid. Also, there's a very big section on using the relational controls that were added in the extension library for Domino 9 to access relational data from an XPage. So for the webinar, for everyone watching it, we do have a special sale price on that course. Using the link that's on this slide, you're going to get the slides. And I will also put it into the chat. Also, this link has the sample database Paul is showing. So you'll get all that in an email that will come in a few days. So let's see, Paul, if you can go to the next. Okay, so again, asking questions, the GoToWebinar interface, there's a questions pane that you can put your questions in. And then I'm going to read the questions to Paul, and he will respond to them. And finally, Paul, if you go to the next slide. Couple events coming up. Actually, one is kind of soon, and that's the Engage conference in Ghent. I think there were only 50 spots left yesterday. So if you're thinking of attending, if you're in Europe, this is an excellent free conference with many good speakers, many presented at the Connect Ed conference in Orlando, and people you're probably reading about, who do blogs and stuff like that. So, so definitely check that out for your long-range planning. If you're in the U.S. or just want to visit the U.S. in August, there's going to be another MW user group meeting, this time in Atlanta, in the towards the end of August. So just for your long-range planning, or start hitting your bosses up for the authorization to travel. Again, that's free or almost free. There might be a slight contribution requested for that. Okay, so Paul, we have a lot of questions here. The first one is from another Paul, and he wants to know, how do you bind your REST service to a database on a different server?
There is no server property. And
So then the easy solution to this would be create your own REST service using an XAgent. If there isn't, well, Paul's going to take a quick look.
No, there is no server property. We have a database name where you can specify the database. So there's not a direct way to do it. But Howard, you had a suggestion?
Just create an XAgent and create your own REST service would be one solution.
Okay.
As a possibility. The other thing, I believe the REST service doesn't have to be on the same XPage as your Dojo DataGrid, right, Paul? Can't you give it a URL in the Dojo DataGrid?
Oh,
it's pointed to
you can
the URL.
specify a store, okay, and you can specify any object in the store object. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
But
then
no, you cannot specify a URL.
Okay. Well, I guess you could get the store, though. You can create the JavaScript object by going to the URL of the REST service on a different server.
Yeah, that would work as well.
Okay, and this is kind of related. Actually, can you populate the data grid from an external data source, such as the relational controls? The REST service does have the option to use the relational controls to pull in the data? Question was from Martin. So in the REST service, when you go to choose your data source, I think is what it's called, there is an option for using the relational controls under the service type. So that would be one way to display relational data in the Dojo Data Grid.
Yeah, let me just add a new REST service here. I am projecting my screen, correct?
Yes, correct. So there's a, you might not have the relational.
I don't have the
controls. You don't have the exception library.
But I did look at
that. It does have that as an option. So Martin, that's the answer to your question. Paul, Scott wants to know, does the disable column sort still take effect if the user reorders the columns?
Well, no. I mean, that's not a good combination of features. So that was, this particular example here. And we can't address the column by name, just by number. So if we add column reordering to this particular example, and I can do that here in the Dojo properties. Actually, let me go to the all properties. It's a little easier. So if I add column reordering, and set that to true, it's working well now. Okay, so I can still sort those other columns fine, and I can't sort this fourth column. However, when I reorder my columns, did I get the wrong spelling on that? Let me see if I did. Yep. Reorder. I'll get it. Yep. Okay, so let me save that and refresh. Okay, so can't sort that fourth column. Now when I reorder, I can't sort that fourth column, that city column. I can try to sort this one, but it's not working. So there is no way to address the column by name or by field name. You can only address by column order. So you don't want to combine those two properties, column reordering and can sort equals false for a particular column.
Okay. And then Alan had a similar question, so we'll skip that. Can you filter the view in your REST service? Paul wants to know that.
Yeah, we looked at the one example with a full text search, but any REST service, well, your view JSON service and your view file item service, the ones that are supported with the data grid control, include the category filter. So if you wanted to filter by a categories column, they just show just the entries within that view that fall into that category, you would pass that category value into the category filter. Or if you wanted to perform a sort, you would pass into the keys property an array of columns or column values to sort by, and it has to match up specifically with the first, second, third sorted column within the view. Does that answer that question?
I think so. And Sue wants to know if you can do a Dojo data grid from multiple data sources, in other words, from several different views. And and potentially in different databases. I think that's the same answer as we had for Paul. I believe you'd have to use a custom X agent to create your own JSON data source.
You can also create a custom REST service as well. So another option is to create a custom REST service and choose this one. Custom REST service, and then in the do get, this is the method to actually get your JSON object. You could build that JSON object, through an X agent, or
well, you put the code. Yeah, that's server-side JavaScript there in the editor, so you could, I assume, so you can write any server-side JavaScript or call out to a Java method for any of those. Because, and if you keep this up on the screen, Paul, let me find the related question. Someone, well, anyway, I know it's there somewhere. I didn't see it, but someone also asked about if we're using a different data source like the relational data sources, how can we insert a new record? And that would be with the do post method here in the custom REST service. You could then write whatever Java or server-side JavaScript you'd want to create and add in a new record if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Moving on to the next question. Let me just make a comment that we are recording this webcast and the slides. The recording and a sample database will be sent out in an email in a day or two. Once we get everything all together, we'll send out an email to everyone who registered for the webinar. Let's see. So, Paul, here's a question on the Dojo Data Grid from Pooja. Can you provide infinite horizontal scrollings? In other words, can you make the first column stay in position and scroll to the right? I think I was looking at Oliver's with the data tables. That looked like something you could have done with the data tables.
You're kind of losing me there, like infinite scrolling to the right.
In other words, the order number would stay fixed, and could you have a horizontal scroll bar to scroll
I
over
see what
to
you
see
see.
more
So it's kind of like locking that particular column.
Right, like you can do like in Excel, you have that option.
You know, I have not seen that feature in the Dojo Data Grid.
Is there a way to even specify a horizontal scroll bar, or is it, I guess if you had enough information, would it put up a...
You know, right now what I'm thinking, Howard, is side-by-side data grids.
Okay, what happens if you make your browser run arrow? I guess the it just doesn't show the whole grid, right?
Yeah, it just takes it off.
Okay. Yeah. So we'd have to look into that some more. Okay, so let's see. I think we kind of answered that. Here's a question from Scott. Does the Dojo delete item respect the Domino access control, or does it bypass that?
No. Domino security is in place with the Dojo Data Grid, and with any XPages control that's available to you. So, no, it wouldn't bypass that. The user would have to have the delete privilege to be able to delete that document, for that deletion to be saved.
Okay. And Ingo wants to know if you could add images in a column.
I don't know. How would you do that? I mean, you would add a custom column into your REST service.
Could you put an image tag in that? Well, it wouldn't be in that. It would be in the, I guess if you could specify HTML in a column in the grid.
That's what I'm looking for.
Oh,
so let me item file service, and I'm going to add a custom column. Yeah, why not? Value. Should be able to return the image.
Yeah, I don't know if it would render the HTML. I guess we'd have to experiment, but that's how you'd
Yeah.
experiment and try it.
That's where I would start. I'd certainly start with adding the custom column into my REST service.
And Judy had a similar question. Can you display in the column have a link that you can click on? So I guess the question on the images and the question on creating links all depends on how do you pass through HTML in the Dojo DataGrid and whether that can be done. So probably could Google that.
Oh, you can certainly have a link to click on, and that's your two-page approach. And
so you just use like an on-click event.
660 demos. So this is right in our course that I'm referring to. Okay, so here's a link, and right now I'm in the demo XPage 661 view XPage, and then using that technique that I referred to, that two-page technique, for every entry in the grid, I can return the @unid field to return the document ID for this document. And then when I click on that link, it's opening a different XPage, Domino XPage 661 input, and passing in the search query the property from that particular, the value from that particular @unique, basically the document ID for that document. So that's how that's delivered. So yes, you can definitely have a link within a column.
Okay, good. Yeah, so you could do anything you want there, pass it any attribute in your, you build the URL any way you want to not only open documents, but do anything. Okay, I think we're kind of out of time there. Paula, thank you. That was a great presentation. We had some good feedback in the questions.